I'm excited to introduce you to Glenn Packard, who is the Executive Director of the Health Transformation Team at Delta Dental of Washington. And Glenn and I worked together for years, actually, and have many, many stories to tell. But Glenn, I wonder if you could, come in, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and your experience, and then put us into the story of when you were indeed made the new head of this group and had quite a steep road ahead of you.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Hannah. It's really a pleasure to be invited into this space. I have a lot of admiration and respect for Hannah's skill and experience, and so just being invited to participate in this forum is it feels really good. It means I figured some things out, I think, which I enjoy. So just to quickly touch on my story, I have a varied career, and it has generally involved a lot of disruptive innovation, whether it was in a corporate setting, even in an anti-poverty, housing and homelessness setting, in philanthropy, and then now in healthcare. And throughout that, I was able to keep myself just below the radar so that I didn't really have to deal with a lot of the politics and things that happen at a board level or an executive level. And when I was invited into this role a few years ago, we were starting from scratch. We were going to focus on long-term innovation. We wanted to build on a history of innovative work that we had done in Delta's foundation here in Washington State. But I personally hadn't had any experience working directly with the executive suite and the board and sort of shaping what that process looks like and, how to engage with those kinds of folks. So I reached out to Hannah in the hope that she could sort of hold my hand along the way and help me figure out what's different about working at that level than what I had been doing before. I knew I had some good instincts around innovation and human-centered design, even though I didn't know the language. But I really needed to understand how to bring that up a level. And that's why I reached out to Hannah. We started off with basic coaching. Then we started talking about, the design thinking. And honestly, it was hard. If I hadn't had somebody sort of walking with me, I don't know if I would have stuck with it. You get to a point and learning new skills, learning how to do things differently, especially if you've had success doing things a certain way, can be challenging. And yet I quickly became persuaded that this was the way we needed to work in order to move through the complexity in our environment and the politics and the resistance to change that we all knew was there. And so we started doing a lot more design thinking in terms of evaluating what our problem spaces were, what were the goals we were hearing from leadership, and then sort of figuring out what were the gaps between what kind of direction we were getting and what we needed to understand to deliver successful innovation and meet the goals of leadership. How much further do you want me to go, Hannah? I know
Thank you, Glenn. I think that's great. I think the point that I just want people to understand is the reason why it was so hard is because the work that you and your team were trying to do, and I think mine's on the call, was to do incredibly important work in a very challenging space. So, helping people work through oral health issues, and you, of course, can speak to this much more than me, is non-trivial. There's lots of data. There's lots of information. We did indeed spend a long time just trying to figure out what it was we wanted to work on, what it was you wanted to work on with your team. And I think I want to just draw your attention and everybody's attention to the third bullet on the slide. Because in addition to just trying to get you and your team built going and unstuck and all of that, there was a meta challenge that we needed to address as well. You want to talk a little about your...
Yeah. Let me talk about that a little bit. We had a lot of experience, leading change around care delivery in the oral health space and working on medical dental integration, new models of care and new ways of interacting with patients and providers. But the executive leadership of the organization didn't. They had a lot of experience administering a dental benefits company. They had, a great aspirational vision, a lot of motivation, a lot of talent. But it is hard for all of us not to be captured by our environment and learn the lessons of the industries that we participate in. And so I think it was really important for us to establish with our leadership, what does it mean to lead change and innovation in a healthcare space? And what are the implications for a company that is successful and mature within an existing system that we're trying to change? And a lot of the biases that come into that work really can undermine our ability to disrupt in a positive way. So we needed to do some work connecting with leadership and really establishing, our credibility that we had done a lot of work in this space. We knew, sort of the drivers of change. We needed the leadership to be wind in our sails as opposed to always looking over our shoulder and jumping in and kind of changing the center of gravity in our work. But at the same time, we needed to be able to really accommodate their perspectives and ingest all the ideas that they had and really have a process that gave us some discipline in terms of continuing to keep focused on the things that were going to lead us to the long-term goals. So that was a real dance that we had to do.
Right. And that's actually where I wanted to start to get into the depth of the actual example. So we did all this work together, lots of different examples, different meanings. But the one that we wanted to focus on for this discussion was an executive leadership offsite. So as Glenn mentioned, wonderful executives at the organization, somewhere ex-Amazon, ex-other roles. So they didn't really know the space. And of course, as leaders, they're going to be opining on what to do. So the question was, how do we create a leadership offsite that gets them to connect with the content, work alongside the team, not just giving direction to the team so that they absorb and understand how difficult this is, and set the stage so that the future conversations are more directed towards the outcomes they're looking for, rather than doing the stance that, like, people are not speaking past each other rather than working together. So then we worked with you and the rest of the team to come up with a construct for this executive leadership offsite, where it was really all about getting the executive leadership understanding their expectations. We didn't want to do a workshop that didn't work for them. Understanding the key oral health challenges. So what are we really talking about? But getting into ideation as well, so that you could start getting ready for prototyping. And anybody who runs these types of sessions is probably looking at that and thinking, you must be crazy to try to get through all of that in, I don't know, half a day or three-quarters, however much time we had. But we were ambitious and we knew we wouldn't get them again. So we locked them up in the Lake Island room somewhere in a tower in Seattle, and we pushed for it, right? And in doing this, I think you and Maya and the others spent a lot of time actually talking to the leaders to make sure that they were ready for the session.
Yeah, I would just add that we, initially thought, well, let's write a white paper, let's share some articles, let's get them to read a bunch of things that will help them immerse in the content so that they can have a better understanding or a deeper understanding. And what we learned pretty quickly is if anything is more than maybe half a page or a page, they're not going to read it. And even if they did read it, they might read it one day and then, it becomes sort of it falls into the background because they're so busy and they're moving from so many important conversations every day. But it's very hard for them to deeply immerse themselves in the subject matter unless there's real interaction around in a conversation.
Right, right. And so what I'm going to flash up here is we knew there was a lot of work ahead of us, and we knew in the time that we had that we needed to get them to understand the space and, most importantly, align with the team on what was most important. There's so many things that they needed to consider. So a lot of this work in the first section was actually in this converging space. Here's a lot of stuff. Choose, rank, vote, show us what you think is most important. But then we wanted to spend a lot of time in the ideation space as well. So for those of you, again, who do this work, there's a lot of methods in there. There's a lot of work that we plan to push through, but we went for it anyway. And this visual is just a snapshot of all of the things that we did. Exercise after exercise, where in that moment, when they were working on whichever piece it was, the rest of the world disappeared. and they were able to focus exactly on that specific question, whatever it was. And what you'll notice here is the left-hand side of this board, which is actually bigger than the right-hand side of this board, was all of that understand work. This is where we said to them, we're going to show you these issues, and we're going to show you these challenges, and we're going to show you these concerns. We want you to engage, and we want you to help us land on challenges that we think are most important. So rather this time, Glenn, last time when we did the session with Deb about a month ago, we focused on some of these understand methods. For anybody who's back for a second time, thank you for coming. If you're back for a second time, we wanted to show you some slightly different methods. So we're going to focus a little bit on the create side of the page. And the reason why we're talking about the methods is just to give those of you who are not that familiar with this way of working a sense of what it means to work with teams in this way. So let's look at some of the create challenges that we had. The first one we're going to talk about is how we used a method to overcome what Glenn was talking about. Rather than sending people a lot of information to read, we said, we know you're not going to read it, so we're going to play a game with you. And this method is essentially used in many different ways and many different phases of the design thinking flow. But this is where you're going to be giving people different information, and you're going to be giving them play money, and you're going to have them engage with the information and use their play money to show what matters most to them. So you're getting two for the price of one. You're forcing them to engage, right? They can't buy something unless they've understood it. And you're finding the answer to what matters to them most. And there are lots of ways to design this. At Salt, we've done it in the format of a store. This was very funny during COVID because we could say to people, you get your own store. You don't even have to wear a mask as you go through the aisle. And what we did here was create a store with examples of what people had already been thinking about when it came to oral health solutions in the individual system or community health space. This exercise was put together so that everybody going into ideation was on a level playing field. Coming into this exercise, you had people like Glenn and Mari and others who'd been thinking about this stuff forever. They were way ahead of everybody else. This was an effort to get everybody up to speed so that they could start ideating from a similar spot. So Glenn, you have more experience with these examples. Talk to us a little bit, you don't have to go into too much detail, but talk to us a little bit about what you were thinking about when you put the store together.
Well, we had enough experience interacting with the leadership, executive leadership, that we knew that they had a lot of experience in the space, and they'd done a lot of thinking about the long-term goals for the company, and they had ideas, things that they thought would be sort of, basic table stakes for the kinds of changes that we wanted to see. And yet they weren't always aligned with the kinds of drivers of change that our team, who was really deeply immersed in some of this work, were seeing. But rather than just lecturing people or sending them written documents, we really wanted to stimulate really productive, generative conversations where people had the opportunity to compare for themselves a variety of ideas and then try to go through a process of forcing themselves to choose. You can't have it all because we can't invest in everything. So, now that we've set the table with some basic understanding of drivers of the kinds of changes we want, let's look at the kinds of things, ideas that have come up over time that we've talked about over time, or some that you haven't talked about. And if you have to actually force yourself to choose between some of these things, because you can't do them all, what ends up happening is you start focusing in on areas where there are either tensions that people have because they don't see things the same way, or you start getting people excited about things that they didn't understand before. And so the biofeature exercise was a way to put everybody's ideas on the table. So, not to dismiss anything out of hand, but let there be sort of a natural evolution of thinking and affinitizing around the ideas as people discussed them and traded, perspectives back and forth.
Great, thank you. So what you're saying, you probably figured out the game, right? In this technology, you're able to move your dollars. If you want to buy the $60 one, you've got to move six of your $10 buckets. And so people get some quiet time and they think about what they want. And, Glenn decided what was important to him. He cheated. I'm just going to say, Glenn, I know you took from community health and bought your, but again, jokes aside, in these methods, it's okay if people color out the lines because we're still getting what we want from the outcome. So Glenn was there. Mai, I think, is on the call as one of his outstanding colleagues who did a lot of work. She had a slightly different perspective. There were 6 or 8 of you in the meeting. We were able to tally on the side which ones were of greatest interest. And we didn't stop here. We didn't say, okay, thank you, we're done. We know what the answers are. We used this as an input. We said, thank you for thinking with us. Understand there's a lot of possibilities. Now we're going to push you further. And we said that we're going to push you further using another method called a creative matrix. And in this method, we want to get a whole bunch of ideas from you. And we want to get those ideas from you based on specific challenge questions. So Glenn, touch a little bit here on how much work it was to get to these questions and how they actually, served as an anchor for the work.
Well, I mean, I think the overarching point is that it is so important to get the right challenge statement. And that's why some of the understand work is so important, because that actually sets you up to come up with the right how might we's. If you're not clear about what problem you're solving, then it's really hard to come up with the right challenge statement. And now all of a sudden you're ideating and solutioning around the wrong things. And you can waste an awful lot of time and treasure going after the wrong things because you didn't validate either some of your assumptions, the problem that you wanted to work on, or the challenge statement. So I would say that the challenge statements and the problem statements are probably the part of design thinking that we spent the most time and needed the most help on, because I think until you've had a lot of experience getting it wrong, tinkering, getting it right, you don't necessarily have the instinct that this is the right thing. And it is so hard not to put your biases into, your challenge statements, or not to put solutions into your challenge statements. So having somebody like Hannah who could sort of walk with us and give us an outside perspective, a fresh perspective, because we're immersed in it day to day, was just extremely valuable.
Thanks, Glenn. And I think, you can definitely see in these particular challenge statements how hard the team worked to be provocative. How might we help kids want healthy smiles as much as they want to go to Disneyland? Right? That's going to push you to think outside of your box and I need to give them a toothbrush every time they come to school. Right? That's not the same. So this particular method relies upon really rich challenge statements, and it also relies upon thoughtful prompts. And the reason why the prompts are so important is because answering or coming up with ideas for any of these, it's just hard. A blank sheet of paper is just hard. So what I appreciate about this method from the Luma methods is that these prompts break the challenge down. So now I need to just think about that question in the context of tech, AI, or social media, or in the context of partnerships or policies. And so I'm less intimidated as I'm coming up with ideas. And what we tend to do is we create a little healthy competition. There were, like I said, 7 to 8 folks. We had 2 groups. They had a clock running, no more than 12 minutes or whatever it is. And at the end of that timing, we were able to say, well, group 1 came up with more ideas. We don't really care about the quality of the ideas right now. Just get it down. And then after that, we're always pushing, as you can tell. After that, we're looking for even more creativity. We layer on top of that another method called alternative worlds, where we say, okay, you've been thinking about all of this in the context of Delta Dental of Washington and what you can do. What if you were a different organization with different capabilities working on a similar problem? So, for example, if you're a consultant designing a hospital room, you can think like a hospital, or you can think like a hotel designing them, right? So we said to folks, who else has challenges like this, logistical, hard, big, complex. One team chose Apple, one team chose Amazon, and they went at it again, this time with yellow sticky notes. And now somebody else got a turn to win the prize, right? But all this is doing is creating space for ideation without limits. And what both of the groups had here at the end of this part of the program was a lot of raw material to work with. Now, what comes after this, of course, is converging. This is the diverge phase. So rather than spending too much time showing you converge exercises, we can do that in another talk. I'll just share here that and Glenn, you can chime in here, what was so powerful about this is, and I actually have a picture of it, but everybody looks miserable because they're working so hard. I can put it, but what's so powerful here is you've got the CEO sitting next to the executive VP, sitting next to Glenn, sitting next to Mai, sitting next to the dentist, all doing this work together. And there's something very powerful about that experience, right? You never mind the collaboration and the diversity, just this feeling of teaming and that you're in it together. And yes, you have different jobs to do, but you all own and have a part in the success of this work. And Glenn, I don't know if that's what resonated with me almost the most when you guys were.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly, and I think somebody put something to this effect in the chat earlier, because you see this in the biofeature activity. A lot of the design thinking activities, it really creates a level playing field for participants. It doesn't matter what your title is. You get stars. You get to put ideas on the table, and not only does that lead to better ideation and more creativity, it also changes the dynamics in the team itself, because people who aren't accustomed to being able to sit at the table with the CEO and offer their ideas and have the same voice, they really get to sort of grow into their ability to contribute to what the team can do. And that's what you really want when you're doing leading transformation, is you want everybody to be working sort of at the top of their scope and feel, supported in bringing their best thinking forward.
And so thanks, Lily. I'm not going to belabor the point here necessarily, but when I hear you speak like that, it takes me back to the beginning of our conversation. That you're thinking like a transformative leader. You're thinking about like a leader who wants everybody to be at the top of their game, who wants people to feel connected to the work, right? And these methods are just gold when it comes to expediting your ability to do that. So at the end of this very long session, the drinks were waiting outside. We did our usual rose, thorn, bud. Rose is positive, thorn is negative, bud has potential. We wanted to see what people thought of the session. And usually it looks something like this, generally more positive. So if you want to score with your team or with your client or whatever, doing these design thinking sessions is generally a positive thing for them. They like the exercises. People like novelty, right? Many people haven't done this before. So it's interesting. Good to hear each other's points of view, interactive, great energy, all that good stuff. Everybody has complaints. There's never enough time. It's hard to get up to speed. We need a bigger room. You'll always hear that. But the buts are really what's interesting, because this is where you want to start to see what else could you do. And one of the things that popped up here was this question at the bottom. Can we somehow build an innovation roadmap? What do we need to build today that will enable our solutions for tomorrow? And we took that quite seriously then. And we built exactly that. We built an innovation roadmap. So do you want to just touch a little bit on the playbook and what it is and how you use it? We'll show a few examples and then we'll get ready for some Q&A.
Yeah, well, while we were learning this new set of methods and frameworks for working, we wanted some repeatable processes, some structures that would help just maintain some discipline around the way we wanted to work, because we know that we're going to be pulled in different directions by the company and by changing things in the environment. So we asked Hannah and her team to help us build an actual innovation playbook that would say, okay, based on what we're trying to accomplish and the way we want to work, these are the methods we're going to use. These are the ways we're going to validate whether the things we're working on make sense to us, make sense to leadership. It's going to create natural touch points for leadership to engage in the innovation work so that they know we're productive, that we're moving through a lot of ideas. And we also wanted an ability to ingest lots of ideas and quickly evaluate them and either discard them or keep moving forward, but only be spending the right amount of time, the amount of time that we had validated made sense for a particular idea, a particular problem. So this was a super helpful, and it has become an indispensable tool for us in our work today. In fact, I was just using it yesterday because I got pulled ahead in terms of, oh, here's some great ideas, some great solutions. I got caught up in some things and realized, oh, I've skipped a few steps. I need to go back to my playbook and see what I've missed and see what I need to go back and pick up. And we spent a couple hours yesterday with our team, with Mai, sort of going back through some of these exercises and saying, okay, what do we need to clean up? Are we still in the right place? And this was super helpful in making sure that we were still going in the right direction.